The security camera footage told a story no one wanted to believe. A massive German Shepherd, muscles tensed like coiled springs, lunged against reinforced kennel bars with such force the entire structure shuddered. The animal's teeth flashed white against black lips pulled back in a snarl that turned blood to ice. 3 handlers lay in hospital beds because they'd underestimated those teeth, that fury. "Most dangerous dog I've ever encountered," muttered George Thompson, shaking his head as he stamped euthanasia on the paperwork. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. Dawn broke cold and gray over Eagles Landing Animal Sanctuary. Staff moved with grim purpose, avoiding the isolation kennel at the property's edge. Inside the main house, Jack Coleman stared out the window at his granddaughter Emma, her small frame silhouetted against the morning mist. 7 years old, not a word spoken since the accident 14 months ago that stole her parents and her voice. Now she was marching with deliberate steps toward the kennel everyone else avoided. Toward Shadow. "Emma, stop!" Jack's shout died in his throat as the security monitor showed what happened next. The child reached the kennel. The German Shepherd went still, amber eyes locked on the tiny hand extending through the bars. The entire sanctuary seemed to hold its breath. What followed not only saved Shadow's life and broke through Emma's silence, but transformed an entire community's understanding of healing, trust, and the profound connection that can form between the most unlikely souls when everyone else has given up hope. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Shadow hadn't always been a monster. 3 years ago, he'd been the pride of the 10th Mountain Division, a military working dog with an exceptional record for detecting explosives in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Michael Reynolds had trained Shadow from a pup, forming a bond that made them legendary in their unit. But on a dust-choked road outside Kandahar, an aide they hadn't detected claimed Reynolds' life. Shadow had witnessed it all, his handler's body thrown like a rag doll while the dog himself sustained shrapnel wounds along his left flank. The trauma transformed Shadow overnight. Once steady and obedient, he became unpredictable, aggressive toward anyone in uniform. 3 rehabilitation facilities had tried and failed to reach him. The last incident had left a seasoned K9 trainer with 70 stitches and permanent nerve damage in his right arm. Emma Coleman's trauma was different, but no less profound. 14 months ago, she'd been strapped into her booster seat when a tractor-trailer jackknifed on the icy highway. The crash killed her parents instantly while leaving Emma physically unscathed but psychologically shattered. The child psychiatrist called it selective mutism, a complete withdrawal from verbal communication triggered by severe trauma. Emma had watched her parents die, and something inside her had gone silent in response. No amount of therapy, medication, or gentle coaxing had drawn a single word from her since. Her once bright blue eyes now seemed permanently fixed on middle distance, seeing things no 7-year-old should have to see. Jack Coleman had built Eagles Landing Animal Sanctuary after 30 years as a military dog handler and trainer. Following his wife Rachel's death from cancer, the sanctuary became his reason to keep going, a place where difficult and traumatized dogs could find rehabilitation instead of euthanasia. At 68, his body carried the scars of his profession, but his mind remained sharp, his methods both innovative and controversial. The sanctuary operated on a shoestring budget, sustained by Jack's military pension and occasional donations from a community that admired his work but questioned his methods. Taking in Shadow represented his biggest risk, yet a decision made more complicated by his granddaughter's arrival. Jack hadn't seen Emma since the funeral. Now he was responsible for both a deeply traumatized child and a dog that everyone else had deemed too dangerous to save. The phone call came at 5:30 in the morning, dragging Jack from a fitful sleep. Maya Rodriguez, his lead trainer, rarely called this early unless there was trouble. "They're bringing him today, Jack, not next week, today. Animal Control says they need the space and their director wants Shadow's case closed." Her voice carried the tension they all felt. "I've got 3 staff threatening to quit if we take him, after what happened in Denver." Jack rubbed his weathered face, glancing at the photo of Rachel on his nightstand. She would have understood why he couldn't say no. Tell him I'll handle Shadow personally. Nobody else needs to interact with him until I've made my assessment. Jack's tone left no room for argument. And Maya? Make sure the isolation kennel is reinforced. The specs I sent over all of them. By noon, the sanctuary hummed with nervous energy. The isolation kennel, situated at the far edge of the property, had been fortified with additional steel mesh and a double-entry safety system. Dr. James Peterson, the sanctuary's veteran veterinarian, prepared sedatives strong enough to take down a dog twice Shadow's size, just in case. This isn't just another difficult case, Dr. Peterson warned, loading syringes into an emergency kit. I've reviewed his file, Jack. This dog has PTSD that rivals what I saw in combat veterans. The brain injury from the explosion. Watching his handler die, he's operating on pure survival instinct. Are you sure about this? With Emma here now? Jack stared across the sanctuary grounds toward the main house where his granddaughter sat motionless on the porch swing, her small suitcase still packed beside her. She'd arrived yesterday, silent as a ghost, her social worker explaining that Jack was Emma's last option before foster care. I can't turn my back on either of them, James. The systems failed them both. If I don't take Shadow, they put him down. If I don't take Emma, he couldn't finish the sentence. The transport van arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, animal control emblazoned on its side. Two handlers emerged, their forearms protected by thick leather guards, faces grim with purpose. Where do you want him, Coleman? The senior officer asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Isolation kennels prepared. I'll lead the way. Shadow's first appearance shocked even Jack. The once magnificent German Shepherd was a shadow of his military photos. His coat had lost its luster, ribs visible beneath it. A jagged scar ran along his left flank, fur never growing back properly over the shrapnel wounds. But it was the dog's eyes that struck Jack, hardest amber orbs burning with a mixture of fear and fury, pupils dilated even in daylight. Shadow lunged against his restraints as they approached the kennel, a guttural growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Jesus, one of the handlers muttered. He hasn't improved a bit since we got him. The transfer to the isolation kennel was a carefully choreographed dance of tension. Shadow fought every step, snapping at the catch poles, body twisting with surprising strength despite his condition. Once secured in the reinforced kennel, the dog immediately retreated to the farthest corner, hackles raised, lips peeled back to reveal teeth designed by nature for one purpose: to tear and hold. Good luck, the officer said, handing over a thick file. You've got 72 hours before our follow-up. If he attacks anyone here, that's it, no more chances. Jack watched the van depart, the file heavy in his hands. Maya approached cautiously, keeping her distance from the kennel. He's worse than they described, she said quietly. I've worked with aggressive dogs for 15 years, Jack. This one, I'm not sure there's anything left to save. There always is, Jack replied, though doubt crept at the edges of his certainty. Get everyone together. New protocols starting now. Nobody approaches this kennel without me present. No exceptions. By evening, Shadow had refused food and water, his vigilance unwavering. Jack sat on an overturned bucket 20 feet from the kennel, studying the dog's behavior, looking for any sign of the trained military animal beneath the trauma. He's not what the reports say, Jack explained to Maya as the sun dipped below the horizon. Look at his positioning back to the wall, clear sightlines, alert but conserving energy. That's not random aggression. He's operating like he's still in a combat zone. Emma's arrival at the sanctuary had been equally concerning. While Shadow snarled and lunged, Emma retreated and vanished. Her social worker, Lisa Martinez, had delivered the news with professional compassion. She hasn't spoken a word since the accident. Not to doctors, not to therapists, not to the 3 foster families who tried to help her. Lisa's eyes had reflected genuine concern. The last foster placement ended when they found her in the middle of the night, standing in the snow barefoot. She was trying to walk back to the site of the accident. That's when the court decided to contact you. Jack had shown Emma to the bedroom Rachel had decorated years ago, hoping for grandchildren who never came during her lifetime. The child had entered silently, placed her small suitcase in the corner, and sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, waiting for what Jack couldn't say. She needs time, Lisa had advised before leaving. Routine, stability, patience. The trauma specialist believes she can speak physically. She's choosing not to. Something inside her has gone silent. That first night, Jack sat at his kitchen table, two impossible challenges weighing on him. Through the window, he could see the isolation kennel, a security light casting shadows pacing silhouette against the wall. From down the hallway came neither sound nor movement from Emma's room. Two broken souls, both carrying wounds invisible to the eye, yet devastating in their impact. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Jack rose early, bones protesting after too little sleep. He prepared breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and called softly to Emma. To his surprise, she appeared promptly, dressed in the same clothes as yesterday. She ate mechanically, without enjoyment or complaint, her eyes never meeting his. "I thought today I might show you around the sanctuary," Jack offered. "Would you like that?" Emma's lack of response wasn't unexpected, but still jarred him. He tried again. There's a new dog here. His name is Shadow. He's having a tough time, like you. I have to check on him after breakfast. You could come along if you want, but you'd need to stay back. He's not ready for visitors yet." Something flickered in Emma's eyes, the barest hint of interest. Jack noticed it immediately. For the first time since her arrival, she seemed present rather than simply occupying space. After breakfast, Jack led Emma across the sanctuary grounds, maintaining a careful distance from Shadow's kennel. To his surprise, the child drifted subtly in that direction, her eyes finding the isolation structure with unerring accuracy. Jack gently redirected her, explaining the other rehabilitation work happening at Eagle's Landing, introducing her to the safer, more sociable rescue dogs. Throughout the tour, he caught Emma glancing repeatedly toward Shadow's kennel, a curiosity in her expression that hadn't been there before. By mid-afternoon, Jack found her sitting on the grass 50 feet from the isolation unit, watching intently as he attempted to coax Shadow into accepting food. The dog remained deeply suspicious, refusing to approach while Jack was present, but something in his posture had changed, an alertness directed not at Jack Dolman, but at the small figure observing from a distance. That night, reviewing security footage before bed, Jack discovered something remarkable. After he'd left the area, Emma had remained, drawing in a small notebook. More surprisingly, Shadow had eventually approached the front of his kennel, his usual aggressive displays absent as he watched the child with evident curiosity. Neither made any attempt to approach the other. Yet something unspoken seemed to pass between them, a recognition that Jack couldn't quite name but instantly recognized as significant. By the end of Shadow's first week at Eagle's Landing, Jack found himself at the center of a growing controversy. The phone rang incessantly, concerned neighbors, board members, and finally Sheriff Dave Hawkins himself. "I'm not calling as law enforcement, Jack. I'm calling as your friend." Dave's voice carried the weight of 30 years' friendship. "Thomas Wilson filed a formal complaint with the county. Says you've brought a killer dog into a residential area, endangering the community." Jack gazed through his office window at the isolation kennel, where Emma sat cross-legged on the grass, her sketchbook open on her lap. For the fourth consecutive day, she had positioned herself at what Jack had begun calling the safe distance, close enough for Shadow to observe her, yet far enough to prevent any physical contact. "Thomas Wilson hasn't cared about community safety in 20 years, Dave. He cares about the 400 acres I won't sell him for his development." Jack's voice hardened. "Shadow hasn't left a reinforced kennel. He's under 24-hour supervision." "I understand that, but the county board is involved now. They're sending animal control for an inspection tomorrow. If they determine Shadow's a public risk, they can override your sanctuary status." The inspection arrived with all the subtlety of a military operation. 2 animal control officers, the county's public safety director, and a stone-faced Thomas Wilson himself appeared at precisely 9 o'clock. Wilson, a tall man with silver hair and the weathered face of 3 generations of Montana ranching, made no attempt to hide his agenda. "This is straightforward, Coleman," he said, ignoring Jack's outstretched hand. "That animal has a documented history of violence. 3 handlers hospitalized. Deemed unfit for service by the military. Failed rehabilitation attempts at 2 professional facilities. It's a liability the county can't afford. The inspection proceeded with clinical efficiency. Shadow's kennel was examined for security vulnerabilities. His records reviewed and photographed. The dog himself snarled and lunged whenever anyone except Jack approached, confirming the worst expectations of the inspection team. "We're prepared to be reasonable," the public safety director said afterward, her voice professionally detached. "You have 14 days to demonstrate measurable progress in rehabilitation, or the county will require euthanasia. We'll need weekly reports, documented behavioral assessments, and video evidence of improvement." After they departed, Maya found Jack standing outside Shadow's kennel, a storm gathering in his expression. "2 weeks isn't enough time," she said quietly. "Not for a case this severe." "It'll have to be." Jack watched Emma, who had observed the entire inspection from her usual spot, her face revealing a comprehension beyond her years. "Get Dr. Alvarez on the phone. If anyone can help us assess Shadow properly, it's him." Dr. Miguel Alvarez arrived 3 days later, his reputation preceding him. As the country's foremost authority on canine behavioral rehabilitation, particularly with military working dogs, his assessment would carry weight with the county board. Silver-haired and soft-spoken, he brought 40 years of experience and an uncompromising eye to Eagle's Landing. "I need to observe him for 24 hours, he explained, setting up monitoring equipment near Shadow's kennel. "Unfiltered, no interventions. I want to see baseline behaviors, stress triggers, sleep patterns." The next morning, Alvarez's expression told Jack everything before he spoke a word. "I've worked with over 3,000 traumatized dogs, including 200 military working dogs with PTSD," he began, spreading his observation notes across Jack's desk. "Shadow's case is among the most severe I've encountered. The brain injury from the explosion, combined with witnessing his handler's death, has fundamentally altered his neurological responses." Jack leaned forward. "But it can be addressed, given enough time?" Alvarez removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. "In my professional opinion, this dog represents an unacceptable risk. The county's concerns are valid. I would recommend humane euthanasia as the only responsible course of action." The words hung in the office like a physical presence. Through the window, Jack could see Emma in her usual spot, reading a book, seemingly unaware of the death sentence just pronounced upon Shadow. "I respectfully disagree," Jack said finally. "I've seen something in his behavior that doesn't fit the assessment." Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "Come with me." Jack led Alvarez to the security monitoring station, pulling up recorded footage from the past week. The videos showed Shadow's transformation whenever Emma appeared, the subtle shifts in ear position, reduced pacing, lowered stress indicators. "Interesting," Alvarez murmured, "but insufficient. Momentary curiosity isn't rehabilitation. It doesn't change my recommendation." Jack was about to respond when the sky darkened suddenly. Within minutes, a Montana thunderstorm descended upon Eagle's Landing, turning day to twilight. Lightning cracked overhead, followed immediately by explosive thunder that rattled the windows. From the isolation kennel came a sound Jack had never heard before, a high-pitched keening that raised the hair on his neck. Shadow was in full panic, hurling himself against the kennel walls with such force that even the reinforced structure shuddered. The thunder, Jack realized immediately. It sounds like explosions to him. He grabbed tranquilizers from the emergency kit and raced toward the kennel, Alvarez close behind. Rain pelted down, reducing visibility to mere yards. As they approached, Jack saw something that stopped him cold. Emma was running toward Shadow's kennel. "Emma, stop," Jack shouted, but his voice was lost in another thunderclap. The child reached the kennel's outer door, her small fingers working the simple latch that kept visitors at a safe distance. Before Jack could reach her, she had slipped inside the safety vestibule, the space between the outer gate and the actual kennel door. "Get her out of there," Alvarez shouted, genuine fear in his voice. Jack approached carefully, trying not to escalate the already dangerous situation. Through the rain, he could see Emma standing calmly in the vestibule, watching Shadow's panicked circling. The German Shepherd was oblivious to her presence, lost in the throes of his traumatic flashback. "Emma, honey, you need to come out now," Jack said, keeping his voice steady despite his hammering heart. "Shadow's very scared right now. He might hurt you without meaning to." What happened next would later be described by Dr. Alvarez as the most remarkable interspecies communication he had ever witnessed. Emma turned to her grandfather and shook her head firmly. Then, with deliberate movements, she reached into her pocket and withdrew half a peanut butter sandwich, her lunch, saved from earlier. Through the bars of the inner door, she extended her hand with the sandwich toward the panicking dog. And then, miracle of miracles, she spoke. "It's okay, Shadow," her voice, unused for 14 months, emerged as a raspy whisper. "Bombs can't hurt you anymore." Shadow froze mid-circuit, his attention snapping to the sound of the child's voice. His ears, flattened in panic moments before, twitched forward in confusion. "You're safe now," Emma continued, her voice growing marginally stronger with each word. "I get scared too." The German Shepherd approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of peanut butter. Emma remained perfectly still, sandwich extended, as Shadow drew near. Thunder boomed again, causing the dog to flinch violently, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he inched closer to Emma's outstretched hand. "It's okay to be scared," she whispered, "but you don't have to be alone." With infinite gentleness, Shadow took the sandwich from Emma's palm, his teeth never touching her skin. As he chewed, he remained by the bars, no longer panicking despite the continuing storm. Emma slowly raised her other hand and through the bars touched the scarred area on Shadow's flank, the shrapnel wound that marked his trauma. Jack and Dr. Alvarez watched in stunned silence as the connection between child and dog deepened, both souls recognizing in the other a mirror of their own pain. "In 40 years, Alvarez said finally, his voice hushed with reverence, "I have never seen anything like this." The storm eventually passed, but Emma remained with Shadow, talking softly. Her first words in over a year offered not to the adults who had tried everything to reach her, but to a damaged dog everyone else had given up on. The morning after the thunderstorm breakthrough, Jack arrived at Shadow's kennel to find Emma already there, seated on a folding chair he'd placed inside the vestibule. She was reading aloud from a children's book about a police dog, her voice soft but steady. Shadow lay at the inner door, as close to Emma as the bars would allow, his head resting on his paws, amber eyes fixed on the child. When Jack approached, the German Shepherd's ears flicked back momentarily before returning to their relaxed position, progress that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "Good morning," Jack said cautiously, directing his words to both Emma and Shadow. "Did you sleep well?" Emma looked up from her book and nodded. Though she didn't speak to her grandfather, the simple acknowledgement represented a seismic shift from her previous blank stares. "I brought breakfast for both of you," Jack said, holding up a paper bag. "Scrambled eggs for Shadow protein will help him regain some muscle. And your favorite blueberry pancakes for you." Dr. Alvarez arrived as they were finishing breakfast, accompanied by Maya and 2 assistants carrying recording equipment. The behavioral expert had completely revised his assessment after witnessing Emma's connection with Shadow, staying up most of the night to develop a specialized rehabilitation protocol. "We need to document everything," he explained, setting up cameras at careful angles around the kennel. "What's happening here defies established behavioral models. The county board will require empirical evidence of progress, not just anecdotal observations." Emma watched the preparations with solemn interest, then turned to Shadow, who had retreated to the back of his kennel, suspicious of the newcomers and their equipment. "They want to help you," she said, her voice barely audible to the adults. "Like the doctors helped me after the accident." Over the next several days, a methodical routine developed. Each morning, Emma would arrive at Shadow's kennel immediately after breakfast. She would read to him for an hour, her voice growing incrementally stronger each day. Shadow would listen attentively, his body language progressively more relaxed. After reading, Emma would talk to him simple conversations about her day, her parents, the nightmares that plagued her sleep. Shadow seemed to understand, tilting his head at the mention of certain words, his eyes never leaving her face. Dr. Alvarez monitored every interaction, meticulously documenting Shadow's physiological responses. The dog's cortisol levels, measured through saliva samples collected by Jack, showed marked decrease during Emma's presence. His defensive postures, raised hackles, bared teeth, aggressive stances gradually diminished, replaced by more socialized behaviors like play bows and relaxed ear positions. "It's remarkable," Dr. Alvarez told Jack one evening, reviewing the day's footage. "Emma is intuitively doing what trained professionals have failed to accomplish. She approaches him without fear or agenda. She doesn't demand compliance or improvement, she simply offers connection." By the end of the first week, they had progressed to the next phase. Under careful supervision, Emma was allowed into Shadow's kennel proper, a step that caused Jack tremendous anxiety despite Dr. Alvarez's confidence. "His body language is consistently non-threatening with her," Alvarez assured Jack. "We'll have tranquilizer guns ready, but I don't believe we'll need them." The moment of truth arrived on a clear Tuesday morning. Emma entered the vestibule as usual, but this time Jack unlocked the inner door. The child stepped through without hesitation, her trust in Shadow absolute. The German Shepherd remained in his corner, eyes watchful but not alarming. With slow, deliberate movements, Emma crossed the kennel and sat on the floor 5 feet from Shadow. She opened her book and began to read as if nothing had changed. For several minutes, neither moved. Then, with infinite caution, Shadow inched forward until his muzzle nearly touched Emma's knee. He inhaled deeply, taking in her scent, before laying his head gently on her lap. Emma's reading faltered only briefly before continuing, one small hand coming to rest on Shadow's scarred flank. Outside the kennel, Jack released the breath he'd been holding, tears stinging his eyes. Dr. Alvarez nodded in professional satisfaction, though even his clinical detachment seemed affected by the moment. The footage would form the centerpiece of their report to the county board, indisputable evidence of Shadow's capacity for rehabilitation. The universe, however, had other challenges in store for Eagle's Landing. 3 days after Emma's first entry into Shadow's kennel, Dr. Peterson arrived with concerning news following Shadow's first full medical examination, which had only become possible with Emma's calming presence. "He's in pain, Jack," the veterinarian explained, spreading X-rays across the desk. "Chronic, severe pain that would make anyone aggressive. See these bone fragments near his spine? Shrapnel from the explosion. And here an improperly healed fracture in his left rear leg. He's been living with this for 3 years. Jack studied the images, anger rising at the system that had labeled Shadow dangerous without addressing his physical suffering. "Can it be fixed?" "Surgery," Dr. Peterson replied. "Complex, expensive surgery. The spinal fragments are dangerously close to the nervous system. I've consulted with a specialist in Helena who's willing to take the case, but it costs money we don't have," Jack finished. The sanctuary's accounts were already dangerously depleted. Shadow's specialized care, additional security measures, and Dr. Alvarez's consulting fees had stretched their limited resources to breaking point. That evening, as Jack reviewed the sanctuary's finances, trying to find resources that simply weren't there, a knock at the door interrupted his calculations. Thomas Wilson stood on the porch, his expression unreadable. "Good evening, Coleman," he said, declining Jack's reluctant invitation to enter. "Heard about your dog's medical situation. Word travels fast around here." Jack braced himself for another confrontation. "What about it?" The county board meets tomorrow to review your progress report and decide the animal's fate. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. My position hasn't changed. That dog doesn't belong in a residential area. But, mate, he hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something. My granddaughter Claire saw that video. The one with your granddaughter entering the kennel. She hasn't stopped talking about it. Jack remained silent, uncertain where this was heading. Claire lost her mother, my daughter, to cancer last year, Wilson continued, his voice roughening. She hasn't been the same since, but something about that little girl and that broken dog, it got to her. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This isn't me changing my position. This is Claire emptying her college fund without my permission. Says it's for Shadow's surgery. The envelope contained $12,000 in cashier's checks. I can't accept this, Jack said, though the sanctuary desperately needed the funds. You don't have a choice, Wilson replied gruffly. Claire's as stubborn as her grandmother. Nearly as stubborn as your Emma, from what I hear. The money's for the dog's medical care, not for you. Take it or don't, but I've fulfilled my obligation to my granddaughter. As Wilson departed, Jack stood on the porch, the envelope heavy in his hands. The complex tapestry of community connections, even among adversaries, reminded him why he'd chosen this place for his sanctuary years ago. The county board meeting the following day was standing room only. News of Emma and Shadow's breakthrough had spread throughout Eagle's Landing and beyond, drawing media attention from as far away as Helena. Dr. Alvarez presented their findings with professional authority, the videos of Emma and Shadow's interactions providing compelling visual evidence of rehabilitation progress. Thomas Wilson, to everyone's surprise, remained conspicuously silent throughout the proceedings, his usual objections notably absent. When the board voted unanimously to extend Shadow's probationary period by 60 days, allowing the sanctuary to continue rehabilitation efforts, Wilson was the first to leave the chamber, avoiding eye contact with Jack. Shadow's surgery was scheduled for the following week at a veterinary hospital in Helena. The procedure would require an overnight stay, his first separation from Emma since their connection began. Jack worried about how both would handle this necessary separation. We need to prepare her, Maya advised, and Shadow too. The separation anxiety could trigger regression in both of them. For 3 days they practiced short separations, gradually increasing the time Emma spent away from Shadow's kennel. The German Shepherd showed clear distress when she left pacing, whining, watching the gate, but no return to his previous aggression. Emma, too, showed signs of anxiety during these practices, becoming withdrawn and silent again, though not to the degree she had been before meeting Shadow. The day of surgery arrived with clear skies and cool temperatures. Emma insisted on accompanying them to Helena, speaking her first words directly to Jack as they prepared to leave. Shadow needs me, she said simply, her blue eyes meeting his with determination that brooked no argument. The veterinary hospital had made special arrangements, aware of the unusual circumstances. Emma was allowed to stay with Shadow until the anesthesia took effect, whispering reassurances as the large dog's eyes grew heavy. When the surgical team gently indicated it was time for her to leave, she kissed Shadow's scarred muzzle and followed Jack to the waiting area without protest. 6 hours later, the lead surgeon emerged, still in scrubs, to deliver the news. We removed 17 bone fragments from around his spine, she explained, showing Jack post-operative images. The pressure on his nervous system was significant. He must have been in constant pain. We also repaired the old fracture in his left hind leg. His recovery will be challenging, but the prognosis is excellent. When Shadow regained consciousness that evening, Emma was the first face he saw. The German Shepherd was groggy and confused, but his recognition of the child was immediate, his tail thumping weakly against the recovery bed. "You're fixed now," Emma told him, her small hand gentle on his head. "The hurt is gone." 2 days later, Shadow returned to Eagle's Landing, his movement restricted by a protective vest that prevented him from disturbing his surgical sites. The isolation kennel had been transformed in his absence. A comfortable bed replaced the standard-issue dog bed, colorful drawings decorated the walls, and a child-sized desk and chair had been installed in one corner. It had become less a kennel and more a shared sanctuary for two healing souls. As Shadow's physical recovery progressed, so too did his behavioral rehabilitation. Each week brought new milestones. He began accepting food from Maya, then from Dr. Alvarez. He allowed Dr. Peterson to examine him without sedation. Most significantly, he began responding to basic commands again: sit, stay, come, his military training gradually resurfacing as his pain decreased and his trust rebuilt. Emma's transformation paralleled Shadow's. She began speaking to adults, first to Jack, then to Maya and Dr. Alvarez. Her sentences remained brief, her manner still reserved, but the silence had broken. She started accompanying Jack on his daily rounds of the sanctuary, showing interest in the other rescued dogs, though none captured her attention like Shadow. Lisa Martinez, Emma's social worker, visited 6 weeks after the thunderstorm breakthrough, astonished by the changes in her young client. "This is remarkable progress," she told Jack, watching Emma demonstrating to Shadow how to give his paw on command. "We've tried every therapeutic approach available with essentially no results. What happened here is extraordinary." They recognized something in each other, Jack explained. The same pain, the same fear. They found a way to communicate when words and traditional methods failed. The unexpected publicity surrounding Emma and Shadow's story brought both challenges and opportunities. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a miraculous connection between a traumatized child and a damaged war dog. While Jack carefully managed media access, prohibiting direct interviews with Emma, the attention brought unexpected support to Eagle's Landing. Donations increased. Volunteers appeared. Even the military took notice, sending representatives to observe their rehabilitation methods. Not all attention was positive, however. As Shadow's story spread, so did controversy over his past. An online petition demanding his destruction gained signatures from people who focused solely on his history of aggression, ignoring his rehabilitation progress. Several families of handlers injured in previous facilities spoke out against Eagle's Landing, claiming Jack was putting the community at risk. Most concerning was the arrival of Emma's maternal grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell, who appeared unannounced at the sanctuary 9 weeks after Emma's arrival. Elegant and formidable, she made no attempt to hide her disapproval. "This is no place for my granddaughter," she informed Jack after a frosty introduction. "Living in this facility, surrounded by dangerous animals, her education neglected. I've consulted attorneys. I intend to petition for custody." Jack kept his voice level despite his racing heart. "Emma is thriving here. She's speaking again, engaging with the world. Shadow has been instrumental in that progress." Eleanor's expression remained unmoved. "A child's recovery shouldn't depend on a dangerous dog. I can provide stability, proper schooling, a normal life, not this unconventional existence." The threat of losing Emma cast a shadow over the sanctuary's progress. Jack consulted with lawyers, gathered documentation of Emma's improvement, and prepared to fight for his granddaughter. The county's next review of Shadow's status loomed as well, though Dr. Alvarez remained confident the board would recognize their substantial progress. Amid these growing tensions, Jack noticed something remarkable happening among the sanctuary's other residents. Shadow, once isolated from all other dogs due to his aggression, began showing interest in a recent arrival of Belgian Malinois named Ranger, who had served in the same military unit, though years later. The two dogs, initially kept separated by fencing, began mirroring each other's movements during parallel walking sessions. "It's social recognition," Dr. Alvarez explained, watching the interaction with professional interest. "Shadow is remembering appropriate canine communication. His rehabilitation has progressed beyond just human interaction." Emma, observing these interactions with characteristic intensity, approached Jack one evening with an unexpected request. "Shadow needs to meet Ranger properly," she said, her voice quiet but determined. He's lonely for his own kind." The supervised introduction of the 2 military dogs became the next major milestone in Shadow's rehabilitation. With careful preparation and multiple handlers present for safety, Shadow and Ranger were allowed to meet in the sanctuary's training yard. After initial caution from both animals, recognition seemed to dawn 2 veterans of the same battlefield, speaking a language only they understood. By the end of the session, they were engaged in appropriate play behavior, Shadow exhibiting social skills that many had thought permanently lost. This success led to a bold new phase in Shadow's rehabilitation integration with other dogs under strictly controlled conditions. Each new canine introduction was carefully documented, but adding to the growing body of evidence that Shadow could indeed be rehabilitated to a point where the dangerous dog label no longer applied. As the sanctuary's reputation for innovative rehabilitation methods grew, so did interest from professional circles. A researcher from the University of Montana proposed a formal study of their methods, particularly the role of trauma-informed human-animal connection in dual rehabilitation. The potential for Shadow and Emma's unique bond to help other traumatized dogs and children hinted at implications far beyond Eagle's Landing. But even as these external validations accumulated, Jack remained acutely aware of the fragility of their progress. Eleanor Mitchell's custody threat loomed. The county board, while impressed with their documented progress, had not yet made a final determination on Shadow's long-term status. And Thomas Wilson, though temporarily neutralized by his granddaughter's intervention, remained an unpredictable adversary with significant local influence. Most concerning was the knowledge that both Emma and Shadow still carried deep wounds that could be triggered without warning. On the surface, their progress appeared miraculous, but Jack recognized the complexity beneath the nightmares that still woke Emma screaming. The moments when Shadow's gaze would fix on middle distance, his body tensing at memories only he could see. True healing, Jack knew, would require more than heartwarming breakthroughs and public validation. It would demand ongoing vigilance, patience, and the courage to face setbacks without losing hope. As autumn approached in Eagle's Landing, bringing shorter days and the first hint of winter's chill, Jack found himself cautiously optimistic but clear-eyed about the challenges that still lay ahead for the unlikely family they had become. The Montana State Fair arrived with the golden light of early October, bringing with it the opportunity Jack had been both anticipating and dreading. After extensive discussion with Dr. Alvarez, Maya, and even Emma herself, they had accepted an invitation to participate in the fair's Second Chance Showcase, an event highlighting successful animal rehabilitation stories from across the state. Shadow's remarkable progress made him an ideal candidate, while the public platform offered a chance to challenge perceptions about dangerous dogs and influence the county board's upcoming final decision on his fate. "This is our opportunity to show what's really possible," Jack explained to the sanctuary team during their final preparation meeting. "Not just for Shadow, but for every dog that's been written off as too damaged to save." The showcase preparation had consumed the past month, but Shadow had progressed to working reliably off-leash with Emma in controlled environments. His response to basic commands had expanded to include more complex behaviors, particularly impressive given his previous injuries. Most remarkable was his newly developed capacity as what Dr. Alvarez termed a trauma response dog, his uncanny ability to sense Emma's emotional state and to provide appropriate comfort before her anxiety escalated into panic. On the morning of the fair, Jack found Emma in Shadow's kennel, no longer a restricted space, but now their shared domain where the German Shepherd slept each night. She was carefully brushing Shadow's coat to a glossy black sheen, his service vest laid out nearby. "Are you nervous?" Jack asked, kneeling beside her. Emma considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Shadow isn't nervous, so I'm not either," she replied, a logic that reflected their profound connection. The fairgrounds bustled with activity when they arrived, a sensory assault of sounds, smells, and movements that would have sent the old Shadow into a defensive frenzy. Instead, the German Shepherd remained alert but calm at Emma's side, his body language conveying cautious interest rather than fear. Dr. Alvarez monitored him closely, noting physiological indicators that remained well within acceptable parameters. "Remarkable," the behaviorist murmured to Jack. He's processing complex environmental stimuli without defaulting to threat response. The neural rewiring is substantial. Their demonstration was scheduled for 2:00 in the agricultural pavilion. As the hour approached, the venue filled beyond capacity, word having spread about the miraculous connection between the war dog and the formerly mute child. Jack recognized faces from Eagle's Landing among the crowd, supporters and skeptics alike, and noted with surprise that Thomas Wilson occupied a front row seat, his granddaughter Claire beside him. Dr. Alvarez addressed the audience first, providing clinical context for what they were about to witness. He explained Shadow's history, his injuries, and the revolutionary approach that had facilitated his rehabilitation. The technical explanation gave way to Maya's more accessible narrative, highlighting the emotional journey that had unfolded at Eagle's Landing. "What you're about to see isn't just a dog performing tricks," Maya concluded. "It's evidence of healing that many experts declared impossible. It's proof that with the right approach, even the deepest trauma can be addressed." When Emma and Shadow entered the demonstration ring, a hush fell over the pavilion. The child walked with quiet confidence, the German Shepherd matching her pace perfectly. They began with basic obedience demonstrations, Shadow responding immediately to voice commands and hand signals, his focus unwavering despite the distractions of the crowd. The audience's initial tension gave way to appreciative murmurs as Shadow moved through increasingly complex behaviors. He retrieved specific items by name, navigated an obstacle course, and demonstrated scent discrimination exercises that showcased his military training foundations. Most compelling was the trauma response demonstration. Maya, playing the role of a threatening stranger, approached Emma aggressively. Before the child showed any outward signs of distress, Shadow positioned himself between them, his posture protective without aggression. When Emma simulated a panic attack, sitting on the floor with rapid breathing, Shadow immediately performed a trained response, applying gentle pressure against her side, then retrieving a weighted blanket from a nearby stand. The pavilion erupted in applause. Even those who had arrived skeptical could not deny the evidence before them. This was not the killer dog they had been warned about, but a highly trained service animal whose intelligence and sensitivity belied his violent history. As the demonstration concluded, Dr. Alvarez invited questions from the audience. Hands shot up immediately, and the discussion ranged from technical inquiries about rehabilitation methods to more personal questions about Emma and Shadow's day-to-day interactions. Then a voice cut through the positive atmosphere like a blade. "That dog attacked my son 2 years ago." The pavilion fell silent as a man stood near the back, his face tight with barely contained anger. "Denver Rehabilitation Center. My son was an intern. The animal put him in the hospital for 3 weeks, 17 stitches across his face. He still has nightmares." Jack stepped forward, maintaining a calm demeanor despite his racing heart. "I'm deeply sorry for what your son experienced. Shadow was in severe pain from untreated injuries at that time, and now we're supposed to believe he's safe? Because a little girl can make him sit and stay?" The man's voice rose. "What happens when he reverts? When something triggers him and there's a child nearby?" Before Jack could respond, a commotion erupted near the demonstration ring entrance. A small dog had escaped its owner, darting into the ring barking frantically. Shadow stiffened, his training momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden chaos. Emma reacted instantly, dropping to her knees beside him, her hand finding the spot on his neck that helped ground him. "Easy," she whispered, though the microphones captured her words for the entire audience. "Remember your breathing, just like we practiced." The German Shepherd visibly struggled, his instincts warring with his training. For a heart-stopping moment, Jack feared they would witness a regression that would undo months of progress. Instead, Shadow looked to Emma, then deliberately laid down, his body still tense but his behavior controlled. The pavilion erupted in spontaneous applause as the small dog was recaptured by its embarrassed owner. The tension broken, Dr. Alvarez skillfully redirected the discussion back to rehabilitation techniques, though the confrontational father remained standing unconvinced. As they packed up after the demonstration, Jack was approached by a woman in a crisp suit who introduced herself as Catherine Reeves from the State Department of Veterans Affairs. "That was extraordinary," she said, handing Jack her business card. "We've been following Shadow's progress since we learned of his military background. The rehabilitation model you've developed could have significant applications for our K-9 veteran program." Jack accepted the card, hope rising at this unexpected support from an official channel. "We're still refining our approach, but the results speak for themselves." "They certainly do. I'd like to bring a team to Eagle's Landing next month if you're amenable. This could be the beginning of a formal partnership." The drive back from the fair carried a sense of cautious triumph. Shadow slept in the back seat, exhausted from the day's stimulation, while Emma gazed out the window, processing the events in her characteristic thoughtful silence. "You did wonderfully today," Jack told her. "Both of you. I couldn't be prouder." Emma turned to him, her expression serious. That man was still angry. About his son. Jack nodded, unwilling to shield her from the complexity of their situation. "Yes, some hurts take longer to heal. Some people might never trust Shadow no matter how much he changes." "Like Grandma Eleanor doesn't trust you," Emma observed with unsettling perception. Before Jack could respond to this insight, his phone rang, Maya's number flashing on the car's display. He answered through the speaker system. "Jack, you need to get back to the sanctuary now." Maya's voice carried an urgency that immediately set him on edge. "There's a situation." "What's happened?" "Someone posted a video online. Shadow attacking a child. It's already got thousands of views." "That's impossible," Jack said, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "Shadow hasn't been near any children except Emma." "I know that. But the video looks real. Animal Control is already here with a seizure order. They're waiting for you to return." Cold dread settled in Jack's stomach. "We're 20 minutes out. Tell them not to approach Shadow's kennel without me present." Upon their arrival at Eagle's Landing, the sanctuary's entrance was blocked by 2 animal control vehicles and a sheriff's patrol car. Officer Dave Hawkins approached as Jack parked, his expression grave. "I'm sorry about this, Jack," Dave said, nodding toward the uniformed animal control officers standing nearby. "They have a court order. The video's been authenticated by 2 expert witnesses." "Let me see it," Jack demanded. Dave handed over his tablet, cued to a video that had already accumulated over 50,000 views. The footage showed what appeared to be Shadow lunging at a young boy on the sanctuary grounds, teeth bared, the child falling out of frame as the camera jerked wildly. Though somewhat blurry, the distinctive scars on Shadow's flank were clearly visible. "This is fabricated," Jack said immediately. "Shadow hasn't had unsupervised access to any visitors. The only child he's interacted with is Emma." "The metadata says it was taken yesterday afternoon," Dave replied. 2 experts have verified it appears authentic." The judge felt there was sufficient cause for immediate action. "Where's the injured child?" The police report. "Medical records?" "Being processed. The family apparently took the boy directly to Helena Medical Center." Emma, who had been listening from the car, emerged with Shadow at her side. The German shepherd sensed the tension immediately, positioning himself protectively beside her. "He didn't hurt anyone," Emma stated firmly, her small voice carrying surprising authority. "Shadow was with me all day yesterday. We were practicing for the fair." The lead animal control officer approached cautiously. "Miss Coleman, we need you to step away from the dog. We have orders to take him into custody pending investigation." "No." Emma's response was immediate, her hand finding Shadow's fur. "He didn't do anything wrong." Jack knelt to Emma's level, aware they were approaching a dangerous impasse. "Sweetheart, I believe you. I know Shadow is innocent. But right now we need to follow the legal process so we can prove that." "They'll kill him." Emma whispered, tears filling her eyes, like they were going to before. Not without due process, Jack assured her, though his own certainty wavered. I promise you we'll fight this with everything we have. With heartbreaking reluctance, Emma finally stepped aside, allowing the officers to approach with a specialized transport harness. To everyone's surprise, Shadow submitted to the equipment without resistance, his eyes never leaving Emma's face even as he was led to the transport vehicle. We'll keep him at the county facility during the investigation, the officer explained to Jack. No visitors until the case is reviewed. As the vehicles pulled away, Shadow's face visible through the barred windows, Emma turned to her grandfather with devastating certainty. Someone wants him dead, she said, her voice breaking. And they made up a lie to make it happen. In that moment, standing in the gathering dusk at the entrance to the sanctuary that had been their salvation, Jack faced the most profound challenge, yet maintaining hope when all evidence suggested their miracle might be snatched away at the moment of its fullest flower. The county animal control facility bore little resemblance to Eagle's Landing's thoughtfully designed sanctuary. Concrete floors, chain-link kennels, and harsh fluorescent lighting created an institutional coldness that Jack felt in his bones as he was led down the central corridor. 2 days had passed since Shadow's removal, and this was his first authorized visit strictly supervised and limited to 10 minutes. He's in our high-security unit, explained Director Marlene Winters, a thin woman whose clipped tone suggested she'd made up her mind about Shadow long before meeting him. We've had to sedate him twice since arrival. He's refusing food, becoming increasingly aggressive with staff. Jack wasn't surprised. The environment alone would trigger Shadow's trauma responses, not to mention the separation from Emma. He has specific dietary requirements and handling protocols, Jack said, handing over a folder Dr. Alvarez had prepared. His rehabilitation has been specialized. Director Winters barely glanced at the documents. Mr. Coleman, this isn't a rehabilitation facility. We're holding a dangerous animal pending a legal determination. Our priority is staff safety, not continuing your experimental programs. At the end of the corridor, they reached a segregated area marked restricted access. Through the heavy mesh door, Jack could see Shadow pacing in a kennel half the size of his space at Eagle's Landing. The German Shepherd's posture had regressed dramatically, hackles raised, head low, lips periodically pulling back from his teeth. Most disturbing was his physical appearance after just 2 days, weight already visibly lost, coat dull, and a new wound on his muzzle where he'd apparently been trying to force his way through the kennel bars. My God, Jack whispered. He's deteriorating rapidly. That's what dangerous dogs do in containment, Director Winters responded without sympathy. Further evidence that the animal isn't suitable for rehabilitation. When Shadow noticed Jack's presence, his behavior changed instantly. The pacing stopped, his ears, previously flattened against his skull, perked forward. A high whine escaped his throat, not aggression but recognition and distress. He's looking for Emma, Jack realized aloud. He thinks she's with me. The brief visit confirmed Jack's worst fears. Shadow was rapidly regressing in the county facility. Without Emma, without familiar routines and surroundings, the fragile progress of months was unraveling before his eyes. As Jack departed, Shadow's howls followed him down the corridor, a sound of such profound grief that even Director Winters momentarily lost her professional detachment. At Eagle's Landing, Emma's regression mirrored Shadow's. The day after his removal, she had stopped speaking again. By the morning of the 3rd day, she had withdrawn completely, not responding to questions, not making eye contact, her small body curled into itself as if trying to disappear. Lisa Martinez, summoned urgently by Jack, found her condition worse than when she'd first arrived at the sanctuary. This is a severe setback, Lisa confided after examining Emma. She's not just retreating to her previous state, she's potentially moving deeper into trauma response. Her vital signs are concerning. If this continues, she may require hospitalization. Jack felt the walls closing in from all sides. Shadow facing potential euthanasia, Emma's health deteriorating, and now the financial reality of the sanctuary collapsing around them. The canceled visits from potential donors, the withdrawn grant applications, the volunteers who quietly stopped showing up, all consequences of the viral video and subsequent legal action. The sanctuary phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comment, angry community members demanding answers, and previous shadow supporters now questioning their judgment. Jack disconnected it after a particularly vicious call suggesting he should be criminally charged for endangering children. Meanwhile, Emma's grandmother Eleanor had leveraged the situation with ruthless efficiency, filing an emergency custody petition citing clear evidence of an unsafe environment and inadequate supervision. The courts had fast-tracked her request, scheduling a hearing for the following week. Maya remained steadfast, becoming Jack's right hand as they fought battles on multiple fronts. She coordinated with their hastily retained attorney, maintained the sanctuary's essential operations with minimal staff, and spent hours analyzing the suspicious video frame by frame, convinced they were missing something crucial. "The timing is too convenient," she insisted late one evening, rubbing exhausted eyes as they reviewed the footage again. "Shadow makes a triumphant public appearance demonstrating his rehabilitation, and the very same day this video surfaces showing him attacking a child? After months without incident." Jack appreciated her loyalty but felt hope slipping away with each passing hour. The court doesn't care about convenient timing. They want evidence, and right now the evidence is working against us. The sanctuary's attorney, Patricia Gonzalez, had been equally direct in her assessment. "We're fighting an uphill battle, Jack. The video appears authentic to experts. No witnesses have come forward to dispute it. The alleged victim has medical records showing dog bites consistent with an animal of Shadow's size." But it wasn't Shadow, Jack insisted for what felt like the 100th time. He was with Emma all day. "Your granddaughter's testimony would be persuasive," Patricia acknowledged. But in her current state she left the thought unfinished, the implication clear. Without Emma's voice they had little chance of saving Shadow. On the 5th night after Shadow's removal, Jack sat alone on his porch, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand, his first drink in over 10 years. The sanctuary stretched before him, unnaturally quiet without Emma's presence. She had been admitted to the children's hospital that morning when her vital signs became alarmingly unstable, and without Shadow, whose absence felt like a physical void in the landscape. The sound of tires on gravel roused him from his dark thoughts. Thomas Wilson's truck appeared in the gathering dusk, pulling to a stop near the porch steps. The developer emerged, his expression uncharacteristically subdued. "Heard about Emma," Wilson said without preamble. "Claire's pretty broken up about it. Asked me to check if there's anything the family needs." Jack couldn't muster the energy for their usual animosity. "Unless you can disprove that video or find the real dog that attacked that kid, there's not much anyone can do." Wilson studied him for a long moment. "You really believe that dog is innocent, don't you?" "I know he is. Shadow hasn't had unsupervised access to any child except Emma. The whole thing is fabricated, but I can't prove it." Jack took another sip of whiskey. "In 3 days they'll likely euthanize him. By the end of next week, Emma's grandmother will probably have custody. And then this." He gestured broadly at the sanctuary. "None of it will matter anymore." Wilson removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture that seemed almost apologetic. "I've never made a secret of wanting this land, Coleman. But not like this. Not with a child in the hospital and a decent man losing everything he's built." "Decent?" Jack laughed bitterly. "That's not the word you used at the county board meetings." "We've had our disagreements," Wilson acknowledged. "But what's happening now, it doesn't sit right." Before their conversation could continue, Jack's phone rang, the hospital calling with an update on Emma. As he answered, Wilson nodded a wordless goodbye and returned to his truck. Jack barely noticed his departure, his attention entirely captured by the doctor's grave voice describing Emma's deteriorating condition. Later that night, sitting beside Emma's hospital bed, Jack confronted the darkest moment of his life. His granddaughter lay pale and still, connected to monitors that beeped with mechanical indifference. Shadow remained in county custody, his euthanasia hearing now just 48 hours away. And Jack himself had received notice that the sanctuary's insurance was being canceled effective immediately, the final blow that would make continued operation legally impossible. In the sterile quiet of the pediatric ward, Jack Coleman faced the possibility that everything he had fought to build, everyone he had tried to save, might be lost. The miracle connection between a traumatized child and a damaged dog, a bond that had healed them both when nothing else could, was being systematically destroyed by forces he seemed powerless to fight. The early morning call jolted Jack from the uncomfortable hospital chair where he'd spent the night at Emma's bedside. Claire Wilson's voice came through breathlessly, urgency in every word. "Mr. Coleman, I need you to meet me at the Crossroads Diner in 30 minutes. It's about Shadow in the video. I found something." Jack glanced at Emma's unconscious form, monitors still beeping steadily. "I can't leave Emma right now." "Trust me," Claire insisted, "this can't wait. It might be our only chance to save Shadow before tomorrow's hearing." 27 minutes later, Jack entered the nearly empty diner on the outskirts of Eagles Landing. Claire sat in a corner booth, a laptop open before her, her face carrying the intensity of someone who hadn't slept. More surprising was the woman beside her, Dr. Valerie Harper, the sanctuary's former veterinarian who had resigned abruptly 3 months earlier after a disagreement with Jack over treatment protocols. "Thank you for coming," Claire said, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. "Dr. Harper has something you need to hear." The veterinarian couldn't meet Jack's eyes, her fingers nervously tapping against her own coffee mug. "I never wanted it to go this far," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to understand, they promised no one would get hurt. It was just supposed to discredit the sanctuary enough to force a sale." Jack's exhaustion vanished, replaced by sharp focus. "What are you talking about?" "In the video, the attack, it was staged." Dr. Harper swallowed hard. "There was no injured child. The dog in the video wasn't Shadow, it was his half-brother from the same military training program. They look almost identical, except for surgical scars that were added digitally." Claire turned the laptop to show Jack a frame-by-frame analysis of the video. "I've been working in digital media since college," she explained. "Once I started looking closely, the manipulation became obvious. The scar patterns don't move naturally with the dog's body. They're superimposed." Jack struggled to process this information. "Who's they? Who orchestrated this?" Dr. Harper's eyes filled with tears. "Robert Miller, the developer working with your neighbor Wilson. He approached me months ago, offered to fund the private practice I've always wanted in exchange for information about the sanctuary's security weaknesses, financial troubles, again, anything useful." "My father had no idea," Claire interjected quickly. "He wants this land, yes, but he'd never stoop to something like this. When I showed him my analysis of the video last night, he was the one who insisted we track down Dr. Harper immediately." The veterinarian continued her confession. "It started small, just information about the sanctuary's financial struggles. Then Shadow arrived, and suddenly there was this intense interest in finding ways to have him removed. Miller said it would accelerate the sanctuary's collapse." Jack's mind raced, connecting pieces that had seemed unrelated. The county board meetings, the anonymous complaints, the sudden insurance cancellation, all Miller's doing? "He has connections throughout the county," Dr. Harper confirmed, "but the video crossed a line I never agreed to. When I saw what they'd done, how they were willing to condemn an innocent animal and destroy a child's recovery." Her voice broke. "I should have come forward immediately, but I was afraid. The contract I signed has severe penalties." Claire placed a USB drive on the table. "Everything's here. Dr. Harper's communications with Miller, the original unaltered footage they used to create the fake video, bank transfers. Enough evidence to clear Shadow and expose the whole scheme." Jack stared at the small device that might save everything he was about to lose. "Why are you helping me, both of you?" Dr. Harper spoke first. because I became a veterinarian to save animals, not condemn them. What's happening to Shadow is wrong, and I can't live with my part in it. And I'm helping because my father taught me that you fight fair, even against your opponents," Claire added. "What Miller did wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. To Shadow, to Emma, to you." Armed with the evidence, Jack's next stop was the sheriff's office, where Dave Hawkins reviewed the materials with growing dismay. "This is criminal conspiracy, fraud, falsifying evidence," Dave said, looking up from his computer screen. "Miller won't just lose his development deal, he'll likely face serious charges." "Shadow's hearing is tomorrow morning," Jack reminded him. "We need to move quickly." Within hours, the machinery of justice began grinding into action. Judge Merrill, who had issued the original seizure order for Shadow, signed an emergency stay after reviewing the new evidence. Sheriff Hawkins dispatched deputies to Miller's office with warrants. Patricia Gonzalez filed emergency motions to dismiss all actions against the sanctuary. But the most urgent matter remained Shadow's deteriorating condition at the county facility. Jack, accompanied by Dave Hawkins, arrived there by mid-afternoon, court order in hand demanding Shadow's immediate release. Director Winters received them with barely concealed hostility. "The court order changes nothing about this animal's dangerous nature," she insisted, leading them to the high-security area. "He's become increasingly volatile since your last visit." When they reached Shadow's kennel, Jack's heart sank. The German Shepherd lay listlessly on the concrete floor, his once powerful body noticeably thinner, his eyes dull and unresponsive. Even when Jack called his name, Shadow barely lifted his head. "He's given up," Jack said softly. "We need to get him back to the sanctuary immediately. And he needs to see Emma." "The child is hospitalized," Director Winters pointed out. "You can't bring a dog, especially one with his history, into a pediatric ward." "Watch me," Jack replied. Dr. Peterson was waiting at the sanctuary when they arrived with Shadow. The veterinarian's expression grew grave as he examined the German Shepherd. "Severe dehydration, probable muscle atrophy, elevated heart rate," he reported. "He's in a state of physical and psychological distress that could become life-threatening if not addressed immediately. He needs fluids, nutrition, and frankly, he needs Emma." The hospital administrator's initial refusal to allow Shadow on the premises met the immovable force of legal documents, medical necessity statements from both Dr. Peterson and Emma's physician, and Jack Coleman's absolute determination. By early evening, arrangements had been made for a controlled visit in a private room of the pediatric wing. Jack walked beside Shadow's transport gurney, the German Shepherd still too weak to manage the journey on his own. Hospital staff gave them a wide berth, whispers following in their wake. Emma's room was at the end of a quiet corridor, the lights dimmed to accommodate her sensitivity. "Her condition remains fragile," the attending physician cautioned Jack. "This is highly unconventional, but her vitals began deteriorating so rapidly after separation from the dog that we're willing to try unorthodox approaches." Emma lay small and still in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets. Monitoring equipment surrounded her, tracking every breath, every heartbeat. Jack guided Shadow's gurney to the bedside, then carefully helped the weakened dog onto a specially prepared mat alongside Emma's bed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Shadow lay exhausted, his muzzle resting on the edge of Emma's mattress. Then slowly the German Shepherd raised his head. His nostrils flared, taking in Emma's scent. A soft whine escaped him, the first voluntary sound he'd made in days. One of Emma's monitors began to beep differently. Her heart rate, which had been dangerously slow, started to increase. Her breathing pattern changed. Shadow summoned what little strength he had left and raised himself further, gently placing his muzzle against Emma's hand. The small fingers twitched, then curled around the dog's fur. "They're responding to each other," the physician whispered, watching the monitors with astonishment. "Her brain activity is increasing. She's coming back." Over the next hour, both patients began a synchronous journey back toward consciousness. Emma's vital signs steadily improved as Shadow maintained physical contact. The German Shepherd, despite his own weakened state, seemed to draw strength from the child's gradual awakening. By nightfall, Emma's eyes had opened. Her first word, barely audible, was Shadow. Outside the hospital, events continued to unfold with remarkable speed. Robert Miller had been taken into custody, facing multiple felony charges. The falsified video had been publicly debunked, with major news outlets now covering the story of corporate greed nearly destroying a child's recovery and an innocent animal's life. Eagles Landing's phone began ringing with calls of support rather than condemnation. Perhaps most surprising was Thomas Wilson's public statement distancing himself completely from Miller's actions and announcing his withdrawal of all opposition to the sanctuary's operations. While Mr. Coleman and I have had our differences, Wilson told reporters what happened here was a perversion of legitimate business disagreement into something unconscionable. My family and I fully support Shadow's return to Eagles Landing and the continuation of their important work. As midnight approached, Jack sat in Emma's hospital room, watching his granddaughter sleep peacefully for the first time in days. Shadow lay beside her bed, his own condition stabilized by IV fluids and proper care, his eyes rarely leaving Emma's face. The immediate crisis had passed, though the road to recovery for both of them would require time and patience. Dr. Alvarez, who had flown in upon hearing the news, observed them with professional interest mingled with genuine emotion. Their connection defies conventional behavioral models, he noted quietly to Jack. The level of psychological interdependence is extraordinary, yet somehow not pathological. They're not just mirroring each other's recovery, they're actively facilitating it. They recognize something in each other from the beginning, Jack replied. Something the rest of us couldn't see. Maybe that's what saved them both. As dawn broke over Eagles Landing the following morning, the story of Shadow and Emma had transformed from a local controversy to a national conversation about animal rehabilitation, childhood trauma, and the unexpected ways healing can occur. The sanctuary, so recently on the brink of closure, suddenly found itself at the center of renewed public interest and support. For Jack Coleman, watching his granddaughter sleep with her hand resting on Shadow's head, the most important victory wasn't in court documents or news headlines or ends, but in the steady breathing of two souls who had found in each other what medicine, therapy, and conventional wisdom could not provide a reason to come back from the edge of darkness. Spring arrived in Eagles Landing, bringing renewal in more ways than one. 3 months had passed since the dramatic events at the hospital, and the transformation at the sanctuary was nothing short of remarkable. Jack stood on the porch of the main house, watching Emma and Shadow in the training yard below. The German Shepherd moved with restored confidence, his coat gleaming in the morning sunlight, his body once again powerful and healthy. Beside him, Emma directed a small group of children through a carefully structured interaction with the dog, her voice clear and assured despite her young age. "Remember to let Shadow approach you first," she instructed a hesitant boy of about 9. "He needs to know you respect his space. That's how trust begins." The boy nodded seriously, following Emma's guidance with careful attention. Like the other 5 children in the group, he carried his own invisible wounds, trauma that had left him withdrawn and fearful. The weekly sessions with Emma and Shadow had become a cornerstone of Eagles Landing's new mission, and healing traumatized children through structured interaction with rehabilitated rescue dogs. Dr. Alvarez joined Jack on the porch, clipboard in hand, as he documented the session. "Her instincts for this work are extraordinary," he observed. "She naturally understands when to push, when to back off, how to create safe challenges that build confidence." "She learned from the best teacher," Jack replied, watching Shadow gently accept a treat from the hesitant boy's trembling hand. The child's face transformed with wonder at this small victory. The sanctuary itself had undergone a dramatic evolution. What had once been a struggling rescue operation now housed the newly established Canine-Assisted Trauma Recovery Center, the first of its kind in the state. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs had provided initial funding, impressed by Shadow's remarkable rehabilitation and the potential applications for veterans with PTSD. Additional grants from national foundations had followed, allowing Jack to expand facilities, hire professional staff, and establish programs that served both children and adults recovering from trauma. Even Eleanor Mitchell, Emma's once adversarial grandmother, had undergone a change of heart after witnessing her granddaughter's profound connection with Shadow. Rather than continuing her custody battle, she had instead purchased a small house in Eagles Landing, allowing her to be part of Emma's life while respecting the healing environment Jack had created. Her business acumen had proven unexpectedly valuable as the sanctuary transformed into a formal treatment center, via her connections opening doors to donors and supporters previously beyond Jack's reach. The Helena Medical Group called this morning, Maya informed Jack, joining them on the porch with a tablet displaying the sanctuary's busy schedule. They want to add another referral day for their pediatric trauma patients. We're already at capacity for the current sessions. We'll need to consider training additional dogs, Jack mused, surveying the sanctuary grounds where construction crews were completing a new educational building, and hiring another handler to work with Emma. Maya nodded, making notes. Lisa Martinez sent over the assessment reports from last month's program participants. The improvement metrics are exceeding expectations across all age groups. The legal aftermath of Robert Miller's conspiracy had ultimately strengthened the sanctuary's position in the community. Miller himself awaited trial on multiple felony charges, while his development company had declared bankruptcy amid the scandal. Thomas Wilson, true to his public statement, he had withdrawn all opposition to Eagles Landing and had even donated the adjacent 20 acres of his property to create a buffer zone around the sanctuary, a gesture that transformed decades of animosity into an unexpected alliance. Inside the house, photographs chronicling Shadow and Emma's journey lined the walls of what had become an informal reception area for new arrivals. The most powerful image, enlarged and centrally positioned, showed them in the hospital room the moment Emma had awakened to find Shadow beside her, with their reconnection captured in a single frame that told the entire story of their extraordinary bond. Dr. Peterson arrived mid-morning, now serving as the sanctuary's full-time veterinarian after the construction of a proper medical facility on the grounds. He had come to conduct Shadow's monthly comprehensive assessment, a protocol established to monitor the German Shepherd's continued well-being and detect any potential health concerns early. "Looking good, old friend," Dr. Peterson told Shadow after a thorough examination. "All surgical sites remain stable, weight is ideal, reflexes normal. No evidence of pain or discomfort from the previous injuries." Jack felt profound gratitude watching this routine procedure. The dog that had once been deemed too dangerous to live now served as a model for rehabilitation programs across the country. Shadow's journey from traumatized military working dog to therapeutic partner had been documented in veterinary and psychological journals, challenging long-held assumptions about the permanence of certain behavioral issues. "There's more than just physical healing happening here," Dr. Peterson observed, watching the interaction between Shadow and Emma as she brought him back to the training yard. "I've been treating animals for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like their connection. It's as if they instinctively understand each other's needs." By afternoon, visitors had begun arriving for the sanctuary's weekly educational tour, part of their community outreach and awareness program. Today's group included psychology students from the state university, several social workers, and a contingent from the military's working dog training program. Emma, still in her element despite a full morning of activities, led the demonstration portion with Shadow, showing how their communication had evolved from tentative first connection to seamless partnership. "Shadow taught me that being afraid doesn't mean you're broken," she told the assembled group, her voice carrying confidence that belied her 7 years. "Sometimes it just means you need someone who understands your fear without trying to fix it right away." Sheriff Dave Hawkins, who had become a regular visitor and vocal supporter of the sanctuary, approached Jack as the demonstration concluded. "That granddaughter of yours could teach a thing or two to some of my deputies about communication," he said with admiration. "Hard to believe this is the same child who wouldn't speak a word when she first arrived." Or the same dog everyone wanted to euthanize, Jack added, watching Shadow patiently allow the university students to examine his once feared scarred flank, but now a teaching tool for recognizing signs of previous trauma. As evening approached, the sanctuary quieted. Visitors departed, staff completed their final tasks for the day, and the gentle rhythm of closing routines brought a sense of peaceful accomplishment. Jack found Emma and Shadow at their favorite spot near the small pond at the property's edge, the setting sun casting long shadows across the water. "Grandpa," Ma said as he approached, "I've been thinking about other dogs like Shadow, the ones still waiting to be saved." Jack settled beside her on the weathered bench. "What about them?" "We should find them," she said simply, "before people give up on them. Shadow says there are many others who just need someone to listen properly." Jack smiled at her phrasing. Shadow says, knowing it represented her deep intuitive connection with the German Shepherd rather than any fanciful childish imagination. Emma had indeed listened properly when no one else could, hearing beyond Shadow's aggression to the pain and fear beneath. "I believe you're right," Jack agreed. "And I believe we're just getting started." As darkness settled over Eagle's Landing, lights illuminated the new buildings that housed their expanding programs. The sanctuary that had nearly been lost now stood as a testament to resilience, to second chances, and to the profound healing that becomes possible when someone refuses to give up on a soul that everyone else has deemed beyond saving. In the quiet evening, Emma leaned against Shadow's solid presence, her hand resting on his head in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The German Shepherd surveyed his domain with alert contentment, his journey from rogue to redeemed complete. Together against impossible odds, but they had created something beautiful from the broken pieces of their individual traumas, a connection that had not only saved them both, but now extended healing to countless others who had lost their way in darkness. In the twilight of our years, we often question if our deepest wounds can ever truly heal. Rogue Dog refuses all people until a little girl approaches reminds us that healing is possible at any age through unexpected connections that transcend words. Like Jack Coleman, many of us carry invisible scars, loss of loved ones, shattered dreams, or the weight of years spent feeling we've failed someone we love. This story speaks to the resilience within us all, showing how even the most broken spirits can find renewal when someone takes the time to truly see our pain. Shadow and Emma's journey mirrors our own search for purpose in our later years, proving that our greatest contributions may come when we least expect them. Their story whispers a profound truth. It's never too late for second chances, for building something meaningful from our deepest hurts, or for finding family in those who understand our unspoken pain. The connections that save us often arrive in forms we never anticipated, if only we remain open to recognizing them. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.